This is my Intel 10th Gen build, which might just be the cheapest 10th Gen PC configuration you can buy. Featuring the Core i3-10100F and the MSI H510i motherboard, all the parts, excluding the GPU, come out to around $480. If you already own a mid-range GPU, then this build will offer an exceptional upgrade path down the line, with the H510i supporting Intel's 10th and 11th gen lineup of CPUs, and that's the main reason why I wanted to do this build, so that I could start off in the budget range and then be able to make this into a higher end PC with just a couple of purchases. Before we begin, if you do want to check out all the parts listed in this video, those will be linked in the description down below. I would like to make it clear that for the price tag of only $480, this build is not bare bones in the least. As I mentioned, it has an Intel Core i3-10100F, which amazingly is only $90 considering the respectable single core performance that is packed in this chipset. It has 4 cores, 8 threads, and a turbo clock frequency of 4.3 GHz. I have this paired with the MSI H510i Mini ITX motherboard, in addition to a 500GB M.2 SSD and 16GB of 3200 MHz RAM. A quick note, if you decide to do a similar build to the one in this video, I would personally recommend actually buying an M-ATX motherboard instead of a micro ITX. The reason I went with a micro ITX is because I plan to do an ITX PC build in the future, but you can definitely save some extra dollars with going with a different size. For cooling, we have the ID Cooling FrostFlow 240, which currently goes for around $50 on Amazon and will keep the CPU plenty cool no matter the challenge. These parts are by no means premium, but they aren't at the bottom of the barrel either, and each one offers exceptional value for the price that they are sold at. The build process for these parts went very smoothly, except for a couple things which I will get into, but I thought I'd share it with you in a much faster sequence than it actually went down. I did this build in my previously used Cooler Master Q300L case, and even though it might not be the best case for $50, it offers really nice airflow and cable management, so I'm pleased enough to use it for this build. Inside the case for the fans, we have the GIM KB28s that I just reviewed. For $20, you can get 3 of these RGB fans, and I really can't complain. These have worked great and have been more than enough to move air through this case. For the PSU, I've got the Thermaltake Smart 500 watt. I have used this power supply in a previous PC, so I didn't think twice to include it into this build. Screwing in the motherboard and installing pretty much all the components went very well except for the AIO. Originally, I wanted to have the AIO top mounted and the noise was just horrendous, and there was really no way to reduce the trapped air without moving it to a vertical configuration. And before you start criticizing me for my radiator orientation, I've seen countless videos saying how radiator placement is more a preference than anything, so there you go. My AIO troubles aside, I think the assembly process went very smooth, and I even think I did a decent job at cable managing even when I'm using a non-modular power supply, but you can be the judge of that. After getting everything set up, I think the build looks very clean with the white and black aesthetic, and once again for $480, not including the GPU, I don't think it can get much better than this. I've been using this PC to game with my GTX 1650 GPU, and I have to say the performance is on par with my main PC build featuring the Ryzen 5 1600. It's definitely geared for more FPS and esports titles, because it does tend to, struggle a bit in more intensive games. For gaming benchmarks, in CSGO we got 224 FPS on high settings at 1080p, at Valorant we got 82 FPS, and lastly in Minecraft we got a pretty respectable 215 frames per second. Like I said, those are pretty decent numbers, and if you don't mind lowering settings a bit, you can pretty much play any game on this PC, obviously depending on which GPU you plan to put into the build. For benchmarking, I'm going to be comparing this to my Ryzen 5 1600 build, which are fairly comparable, and as we can see in the results, it definitely reflects that. This PC actually outscored my main build in the 3D Mark Time Spy score, which is pretty surprising considering the GPUs are the same, but the Ryzen 5 1600 actually outperforms the i3. What didn't surprise me was the Cinebench scores of 5355 for the multi-core test with this PC and 1098 for the single core test. While the 10100F doesn't perform as well in the multi-core test as the Ryzen 5 1600, it makes up for that deficit in the single core test, which it demolishes the 1600 in. Overall, when it comes to performance, if you pair this 10100F with pretty much any mid-range GPU similar to the 1650, you'll be able to play most games if you don't mind adjusting some settings. Alright everybody, that's it for this build video. If you did enjoy it, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, and I will be coming out with more videos about the individual parts of this PC because I think they're really cool and they offer great value for the price. With that said, I will catch you in the next one. Peace.